Now, I'm not a big resolution guy. It could have something to do with that I'm not a great sort of follow-through guy, do the same thing every day for any length of time. Like, that's a struggle for me. I'm a random woohoo kind of guy, right? Big surprise. So anyhow, I thought it probably wasn't a bad idea. I'm getting a little older and should probably consider some physical fitness things and kind of dig into that just a little bit. And I realize that comes as quite a shock to you when you consider what you're, yeah. So anyways, I was doing a bunch of research on YouTube. I don't know. Anyways, trying to come up with some little routines that I think would be helpful, not too much because it'll actually do it, and all that kind of stuff. And I've discovered, and I've heard this over the years, never really practiced it, that lunges are important. Are you with me? A lunge is quite important. Don't get your toe, right, your knee over your toe, like there's all these rules with lunges, okay? Very important. I'm watching this one guy, and it was fascinating. Fascinating. He was like showing us all these things, and then he goes, I want you to do a 360-degree lunge. And I'm like, okay, that's for me, all right? So what you do is you take the position, all right? So you're all balanced, and you throw yourself up in the air, you do 90 degrees, and you stick the landing like an Olympic gymnast. That's what you do. All right? And you just keep working your way around 90 degrees at a time. And in my little workout routine, that's for 45 seconds. Then I get a 15-second break, and then I move on to some other little deal. I killed it. Absolutely nailed it. It was awesome. The next morning, I thought Carla was going to find me at the bottom of the stairs. I'm telling you, I got out of bed and I started walking. I'm like, I am not going to make it. Like, this is not going to go well. Coming up the stairs was just as bad. Now, listen, being a guy of my advanced age and all that kind of stuff, you'd think that I might understand that maybe a little caution when you step back into something would be good. That would be called using discernment. I don't really have that. I do remember, however, when the dude was showing me the 360 degree on that YouTube video, that this little pop-up window came up in the right-hand corner. You know that window. For those of you who might find the 360 degree a little tough to start with, you might want to start with the introductory or the beginner thing. And as soon as I hear the word beginner, forget it. Forget it. I'm going in. Whether it's going to help me or not, wrecked my knee. I'm still working out, though. I'm doing the rehab. Therapist said, listen, you didn't do permanent damage, okay? There's no structural damage in there. You just might want to focus on these exercises and consider your age next time. Fair enough. All right. I'll see what I can do. We're going to review, all right? 3 resolutions, first 3 weeks, Pastor Steve, right? We're going to review, all right? So the first one is, I am going to enter 2019 as a... Oh my goodness. Okay, you guys laughed the most at that story, but you, out of the 3, let's just say someone has to be at the bottom. Surrendered, okay? I'm entering 2019 as a surrendered follower of King Jesus. We're going to learn how to surrender our lives to him. Okay, I think you can make it up on this one, all right? So I'm going to live... Oh, yeah, wouldn't have anything to do with the banners or the little things we got going on there. Right, we're going to live 6-8 in 2019. Good for you, good for you. All right, last one. We had 3 chairs here. I'm going to live in the... Yes, woo, you redeemed yourselves. Nicely done, fantastic. And so, as I was sitting there listening, I knew I had this opportunity to speak in between the Teach Us to Pray and what Steve was speaking on. And it just came clear to me that I should be speaking on 1 Corinthians 10. 1 Corinthians 10 is a passage that when I was just a young guy, 18 years old or so, became a set of verses that became kind of like a theme verse to me. And it seemed to just sink in with what Pastor Steve was talking about. So if you got a smartphone or a Bible, I encourage you to take it and turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. We're going to be looking into that. Now, when I was having coffee with someone recently, I realized that some of the things, we sometimes make assumptions that people know this, and we don't always. Now, do you know what a Corinthian is? Someone who lives in Corinth. It's like a Victorian. But not everybody knows that, and that's not, that's not bad if you didn't know it, but that's all it is. And Ephesians is, someone who lives in Ephesus, right? Some lives in Corinth. That's what this is all about. Paul was a church planner, and he went around to the different towns, and he stopped in Corinth, and he started a church there. The letter, first one, is the first letter he sent to Corinth. He'd heard there were some issues and some challenges going on, and so he was going to address them. And that's what these letters are all about. They're written to a very specific time, a specific group of people. Now, the specific issue they're dealing with that we kind of land in sort of the middle of this is Paul's trying to help them to understand some day-to-day lifestyle choices that they're making in around this whole concept of idols and temples and meat sacrifice to the idol and all these kinds of things. Not a particularly current issue within Victoria, but in different parts of the world, very current. It's still a reality. In chapter 8, Paul kind of highlights and references this, and he said, listen, whether the eat's been offered to a sacrifice of an idol or whatever, it doesn't matter. There aren't any other gods other than our one God. So if you're good with your conscience to eat the meat, eat it. If it bothers somebody else, don't eat it. It's really not, it shouldn't be a big dividing issue. But he was teaching a principle that I think is really important for us to understand and to consider as we move forward. And so I want to read the summary of this sort of theme through chapter 8, 9, 10, and the beginning of chapter 11 of how Paul was making decisions. He says there, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Do not cause anyone to stumble, whether Jews, Greeks, or the church of God, even as I try to please everyone in every way. For I'm not seeking my own good, but the good of many, so that they may be saved. Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Now, when I was 18, I came to that verse, so whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do, like do it all for the glory. That just grabbed me. And I took it so seriously. Like I can remember, like I'm a big sports guy, love playing sports, love competing. And I remember trying so hard to figure out, how do I integrate this? Like, how do I play hockey? How do I like literally nail that guy into the boards, like for the glory of God, right? Like, how do I do that? And honestly, I mean, I say it a little bit funny, but I took that very seriously. How do you compete and compete hard for God's glory? All of life, I recognize we need to do that. Now, I didn't understand the philosophical sort of term called dualism. Dualism is simply this idea that there's sort of a secular world, if you like, the everyday do life world. And then over here, you have this idea of like the spiritual world. I didn't understand that then, and frankly, you don't need to necessarily understand that now, because in God's world, there isn't such a thing. They all matter. All areas of our life matter to God. And if you can't do what you're doing for the glory of God, you probably shouldn't be doing it. That's just how that rolls. That's what that means. That out. And so as we endeavor to live out these 3 resolutions, I think there's some things that we need to know. And so we're going to look at the word discernment, or discern, decide, and do. The first word is discernment. We need to understand what it means to be discerning, how we might discern something, and recognize how crucial it is for us to live out our values, desires, our resolutions, whatever that really is. I think this photo will help us. This is one of my favorites of all time. Just bought a head of lettuce. Should I throw it away now or wait 2 weeks like I usually do? See, some of you are too serious and you can't laugh at that because you feel like I should eat more lettuce. Listen, some of you look at that and go, yes, that little saying right there is telling me I should eat lettuce. No. Discernment. Look at that with discernment. What would discernment mean in this? Discernment would be, don't buy the head of lettuce. If you're always throwing it away, why would you waste your money in the space in your fridge, right? No, you still are too serious. You really want to eat your lettuce. Good on you. I'm happy for you. The reality is, we have decisions we have to make. Many of them. And we have to learn how to discern, how to have a discerning sort of mind, to look at things and have a sort of that second sober judgment, if you like, that considering of things. Discernment is not just making a decision. Discernment helps us to make good, great, and effective decisions. And Paul gives us some incredible insight in this. As a matter of fact, in chapter 10, a few verses previous to what we read earlier, it says there in verse 23, and it's this interaction between Paul and people, and Paul is saying, listen, I know that you say that you have the right, you have the freedom, if you like, to do anything. And Paul doesn't disagree with that. He agrees, hey, listen, you got the freedom to do whatever you want. But he goes on to say, but not everything is beneficial. Oh my goodness. That sounds like we're going to need some discernment. He goes on to say, yeah, you have the right to do anything, but not everything is constructive. You see, there's going to need to be some discernment. You're going to need to be a discerning person as you go through life. When Carl and I were raising our kids, we came up with a phrase that we kind of used for ourselves, but it was also, I think we first of all came up with it for our kids, but then we realized, maybe I realized, she probably realized way before I did. Let's go there. And the phrase was this: just because you can doesn't mean you should. Have you ever thought about that? Just because you can, right, doesn't mean you should. Hey, you can do anything, but it's not all beneficial. You can do anything, but it's not all constructive. Just because you can doesn't, listen, we have so many options in our life. We are a first world place. And I know some of you are going, I have no time. That's because you made a lot of decisions without a lot of discernment. Right? We have discretionary time, but we fill it quite quickly. It's permissible. Is it beneficial? Is this how we think? We need to think about discernment. There are all kinds of things we can fill our time with, things that will not put you in jail. All kinds of things that we're going to do that don't lead us to need to ask God for forgiveness. Good, fine, and wonderful things. Lots of good, wonderful things. Does that mean you have to take them all in? Does that mean you have to do them all? I think Paul's telling us no. No. I had a coffee with a gentleman recently, similar age to I am. We had kids raised through the youth group. So it was fun kind of catching up. And I realized that this gentleman and his wife have been doing a ministry for 10 years. It's on a Friday night. It was Cobb's bread, right? You go there and you take the bread because they like to have, at the end of the day, they want to have full racks and all. And they do that as a business model. And then they want to take the bread and hand it out to people who are in need, to different nonprofits and all these kinds of things. Fantastic business model, like unbelievable business model. But they need volunteers to go do this. So they've been doing it for 10 years. And I said, 10 years? Wow, that's a long time. Why? What's sort of the deal about 10 years and why still or not and blah, blah. And he said, we actually had that conversation the other day. My wife and I, we were chatting about it, and we kind of realized, why shouldn't it be 11? Why shouldn't it be 12? Like, if we stopped doing this, what would we fill our time with if we stopped? Like, what would be better? Do you see what I'm saying? And they're like, no, we'd probably just stop and be sitting on the couch. Folks, that's discernment. That's not looking down and going, where's this younger generation? We put in our time. It's going, no, actually, I have an opportunity. And actually, he said, for me, this is one of the ways, he's a very busy businessman. He goes, this is one of the ways that I feel like we're actually helping, act justly and to care for those who are marginalized and are disadvantaged within our society. Oh, man, that's brilliant. It's good. That's what it means to discern, to think through why we do what we do, why we don't do what we do. So that's the concept of discerning. Now we go to this idea of decide, and I want to give you a phrase that will help sort of pull this discerning piece a little bit further and help us actually make that decision. And this question is, what's the wise thing to do? So there's lots of options. And I was helping you try to think through that not every option is something that you need to do, but to help make that decision, maybe we throw this question in there along with that and go, what is the wise thing to do? What would that look like? What could that mean as I'm trying to live a life that brings all glory to God in all that I do and what will benefit others in light of my sort of aspirations, dreams, values, resolutions, right? Season of life, what would be the wise thing to do? What's going to help me live out the call that I believe is on my life by God? What's going to help me to live 6-8? What's going to help me to be in that first chair? What are the wise things that I need to put into my life that's going to help me to live in that first chair? To live a surrendered life to King Jesus. And Paul gives more definition to this in verses 32 and 33, and he says, do not cause anyone to stumble, okay? Whether Jews, Greeks, or the church of God, even as I try to please everyone in every way. And some of you, as soon as I read that, you go, Paul, stop that. It's going to wear you out. You don't try to please everyone. Come on, everybody knows that. You shouldn't try to please everyone. And he goes, no, actually, I'm going to try to please everyone. That's my call. For I am not seeking my own good, but the good of many, so that they may be saved. It's a wise thing to do. Is it beneficial what I'm choosing to do? Is it going to bring glory to God? Is it going to benefit somebody else? Is this wise? Is this what I should be doing? Discernment, wisdom, value, purpose, call. What is it? How do we make these decisions? How do we do this? The third D is do. Discern, decide, do. We are to be men and women of action. It's a given. Paul is saying it here. And if you read some of his other letters, he's big into sports analogies. Chapter 9, he talks about going into training. Going into training so that he could learn how to put others first. We're to be men and women of action. We're to be doing it. It's given there. So whatever you do it all for the glory of God. All of it. Do it. Get after it. Don't procrastinate. You know, when I messed my knee up on the first Saturday of the year, I had a choice to make. I could just go, what an idiot, which I did anyways. You're 54. What are you trying to, it's all good. Let it go. Whatever. Or I could go, no, you know what? I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to go and decide, because I want to be more fit, and I want to, blah, blah. And I kept going. But there's things in my life where I do fail and I don't move forward. There's a gentleman who has written some really great books. One's called Quitter, one's called Do-Over, and one's called Finish. I haven't read the other two. I've got Finish, haven't finished it yet. However, he's talks about how perfect is the enemy of finish. Perfect is the enemy of do. We get to the point where we have these aspirations, these goals, these resolutions and all that we're going to live for God, live 6-8, walk humbly, love mercy. And if we start to trip and struggle, we're like, why bother, right? And because if we can't do it perfect, why should we do it at all? And honestly, folks, that's from the pit of hell. That is just not God. We're going to be celebrating communion in a few minutes. This whole story, the bread, the cup, reminds us that we've got a God who forgives us. He's on the cross and he's saying, God, forgive those people who punched the nails in my hands with those spikes and hung me up here. They don't know what they're doing. Forgive them. Peter comes to him after. Peter, who's denied him in front of all those people in the courtyard around the fire and all this kind of stuff. And Jesus comes along beside him and says, Peter, listen, I want you to start the church. I want you to go and I want you to tell people about me. And he's like, me? Really? He goes, yeah. Come on. Now, that's the heart of our God. And so you're going to trip. You're going to stumble. You're going to do some things that you shouldn't do. Just know that God is right there to help pick you up. dust you off a little bit, restore you, forgive you, reinvigorate you. It's not over when you mess up. We need to hear that. Paul finishes this set of verses with an interesting phrase. He said, "Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ." I love that. He doesn't just say, "Follow me," but he goes, I'm learning from Jesus, and I want to point you there. If you need a bit of a human example, I'm going to do my best to follow him, but just so you need to know I'm following Jesus like hard. Who are your mentors? Who is it that has say or sway in your life? Who are your examples? Social media is an interesting tool. I actually use social media as a bit of a mentor. And someone just looked at me like, "Are you from Mars?" I just got a second one. That's awesome. Well, how are you doing that? I'm choosing to follow people on Twitter who are following Jesus, who are following the example of Christ. And what I find is, as I follow them and as I see them tweeting, that sometimes they'll remind me of a promise of God. Sometimes they'll tell of just this amazing story of what God has done in this particular part of the world. I follow Christine Kane, who's A21. It's a similar ministry as IJM. It's about saving people from slavery and all. I follow them. Why? Because they're constantly calling me to prayer. They're reminding me of the values that I want to have. So listen, social media can suck the life out of you. I totally understand it. Or you can use it for good. And I've chosen to do that. I follow Bob Goff. Remember Steve talked about that book, Drop the Stones? Powerful book. Learning how to set down our judgment on people and to love on people. So I started following the pastor, the guy who wrote the book. It's awesome. He's down in the Dominican now, back in his home country, pastoring, just doing all kinds of amazing things. And I love following them. That's how I can follow them as they follow the example of Christ, and they become an encouragement to me on how to live 6'8" in 2019 in Victoria. Do you see what that looks like? So God is calling us. He's calling us to live for the glory of his Father and for the good of others. Are you willing to do that? Because when you said you want to live 6'8", when you said you want to live first chair, when you said you want to live surrendered to King Jesus, this is what we're saying.